Kael smiled faintly before placing a gentle kiss on his forehead. Outside the office window, the afternoon sun bathed the estate in warm golden light. Inside, surrounded by quiet and comfort, Elian realized something that made him smile. Perhaps, the place he had feared most had slowly become the place where he finally felt safe. Hey, everyone! This is the censored version of this story, edited to comply with YouTube's community guidelines. If you'd like to watch the full, uncensored version, you can find it on my Patreon. To visit my page, simply scan the QR code on the screen. On my Patreon, you'll also find my other boys' love stories, their uncensored versions, and early access to new episodes before they're released on YouTube. Thank you so much for your support, and I hope you enjoy the story. Kael Blackwood. The name alone was enough to silence an entire room. Standing beneath the glittering chandeliers of the Blackwood estate, the Mafia King of Cloudland waited before hundreds of guests. Dressed in a perfectly tailored black suit worth more than most people earned in a lifetime, the dominant alpha looked every bit the ruler people feared him to be. His broad shoulders, sharp features, and emotionless crimson eyes made him appear less like a groom and more like a king waiting to receive a tribute. Around him stood some of the most influential alphas in the country, politicians, business tycoons, generals, and underworld leaders. Yet even those men, feared by millions, lowered their heads respectfully whenever Kael's gaze swept across the hall. He was the strongest alpha alive, the most ruthless Mafia King in Cloudland, a man whose name was spoken in whispers. And today, he was getting married. Kael had refused every marriage proposal his parents had presented over the years. He had no interest in romance, no desire for companionship, and certainly no intention of sharing his life with anyone. To him, emotions were weaknesses that powerful people could not afford. But the Blackwood family had only one demand. The empire needed a legitimate heir. Without one, generations of power, wealth, and influence would eventually crumble. After months of relentless persuasion, emotional pressure, and endless arguments, even Kael finally gave in, not because he wanted a mate, but because he had grown tired of refusing. Unfortunately, agreeing to marry created another problem. No Omega wanted to become Kael Blackwood's spouse. Every family that received the proposal rejected it almost immediately. His reputation was terrifying. Stories of his cruelty, merciless punishments, and icy personality had spread throughout Cloudland. Parents would rather lose business opportunities than send their precious Omega into what they believed was a loveless prison. Only one family accepted. The Ashford family. Or rather, Victoria Ashford accepted. The elegant smile on her face hid years of resentment toward her stepson, Elian Ashford. The moment she heard the Blackwoods were searching for an Omega, she eagerly volunteered Elian without the slightest hesitation. Her reason was painfully simple. She wanted him gone. With Elian out of the Ashford household forever, nothing would stand in the way of her greatest ambition, to find the perfect alpha for her own Omega son, Domiak Ashford. Unlike Elian, Domiak would marry someone handsome, gentle, wealthy, and capable of giving him the luxurious life she believed he deserved. Elian was nothing more than an inconvenience, a burden she had wanted to discard for years. Her husband, Richard Ashford, was horrified when he discovered what she had done. Knowing Kael Blackwood's fearsome reputation, he immediately rejected the proposal, refusing to sacrifice his eldest son to such a dangerous man. But Victoria was relentless. She manipulated the family elders, pressured Richard until he was outnumbered, and finalized the marriage before anyone could stop her. Everyone expected Elian to protest, to cry, to beg, to run away. But he did none of those things. Years of neglect had already stolen the fight from him. The gentle Omega had spent his entire life being reminded that he didn't belong, that his happiness didn't matter, and that his opinions carried no weight within the Ashford family. Every dream he had ever cherished had been quietly taken away until, little by little, he stopped asking for anything at all. By the time this marriage was arranged, Elian no longer believed fate could be changed. He didn't argue. He didn't question the decision. He simply lowered his head, accepted the wedding robes placed before him, and whispered a quiet, "I understand," as if he had been expecting this ending all along. Perhaps, For someone like Elian Ashford, accepting his fate had become easier than hoping for a miracle. And so, while the most feared alpha in Cloudland waited at the altar with an unreadable expression, a fragile Omega walked toward a future he had never chosen, completely unaware that this unwanted marriage would change both of their lives forever. A hush fell over the grand wedding hall as the massive doors slowly opened. Every conversation came to an abrupt stop. Hundreds of eyes turned toward the entrance. There stood Elian Ashford. Only 21 years old, the young Omega looked breathtaking in a perfectly tailored white suit embroidered with delicate silver thread. A long ivory veil flowed from his shoulders, hiding his face from everyone's curious gaze, while a bouquet of golden lilies rested gently in his trembling hands. For a brief moment, the entire hall forgot to breathe. At the front of the aisle, Edward Blackwood and his husband, Elian Blackwood, exchanged relieved smiles. After months of searching and countless rejected proposals, their only son was finally getting married. Their family would finally have a future. Guests leaned forward, whispering among themselves, "Can you see his face?" "No, the veil is covering everything. I heard he's incredibly beautiful." Poor Omega, marrying Kael Blackwood. Curiosity spread through the hall, but no one dared step closer. Standing at the altar, Kael's expression remained as cold and unreadable as ever. He hadn't even bothered to meet his future spouse before the wedding. To him, this marriage was nothing more than an obligation. He neither cared who the Omega was nor what he looked like. But then, a soft scent drifted through the air. Kael's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. The sweet fragrance reached him before Elian did, fresh jasmine kissed by morning rain, mixed with warm vanilla and a hint of honey. It was gentle without being overwhelming, comforting yet strangely addictive. His alpha instinct stirred. For the first time since agreeing to this marriage, Kael found himself wondering, what does he look like? His gaze settled on the slender figure walking toward him. The Omega's movements were slow and graceful, though each step seemed hesitant, almost fearful. Kael had expected confidence. Instead, he saw someone who looked heartbreakingly fragile. Elian felt his heart pounding so violently that he thought everyone in the hall could hear it. His hands trembled around the bouquet. He kept his head lowered, unable to bring himself to look directly at the man waiting at the altar. The closer he came, the stronger Kael's dominant alpha aura became. It wrapped around him like an invisible weight, making it difficult to breathe. His knees felt weak. His instinct screamed at him to submit before the strongest alpha in Cloudland. Only when he finally reached the altar did he gather enough courage to slowly lift his eyes. And then, he froze. Photographs, television interviews, magazine covers, social media. Elian had seen Kael Blackwood countless times before, but none of them had prepared him for the man standing in front of him. Reality was far more breathtaking. Kael was impossibly handsome. Sharp jawline, dark hair perfectly styled, piercing crimson eyes, broad shoulders beneath an elegant black suit. He looked less like a Mafia King and more like a fallen god carved from marble. For a split second, Elian forgot how terrifying the man was. His heart skipped a beat. "He's so handsome." The thought escaped before he could stop it. But the moment their eyes met, Kael's emotionless expression sent a chill through his body. Those crimson eyes held no warmth, no affection, no curiosity, only cold indifference. Elian quickly lowered his gaze again. His fingers tightened around the bouquet. "This man is terrifying." The ceremony began. The officiant recited the vows while the guests watched in complete silence. Neither groom spoke more than necessary. When the rings were exchanged, Kael slid the platinum band onto Elian's finger with steady hands. Elian did the same, though his fingers trembled noticeably. Finally, the officiant smiled. "I now pronounce you Alpha and Omega. You may kiss your spouse." Another wave of whispers swept through the hall. Everyone leaned forward. Surely now they would finally see the mysterious Omega's face. Kael stepped closer. Without a word, he placed one hand gently beneath Elian's chin. Instead of lifting the veil completely, he merely raised the fabric enough to reveal Elian's lips. The rest of his face remained hidden from every curious guest. Kael lowered his head. Their lips met in a brief, gentle kiss. Just enough to fulfill the ceremony. Nothing more. The veil fell back into place before anyone could catch a proper glimpse of Elian's face. A chorus of applause erupted throughout the hall. Congratulations. May the moon goddess bless your union. What a beautiful couple. The hall echoed with cheers and celebration. Kael remained calm and expressionless beside his new husband. Elian, however, stood quietly at his side, his bouquet still clutched tightly in his hands. Everything had happened so quickly. The vows, the rings, the kiss, the applause. It all felt like a dream he hadn't chosen to dream. He was now the spouse of the most feared alpha in Cloudland. Yet as congratulations surrounded them from every direction, Elian could only stand there silently, completely lost, with no idea what awaited him beyond the doors of the wedding hall. By the time the wedding celebrations came to an end, night had already blanketed Cloudland. A convoy of black luxury vehicles left the Blackwood estate, escorting the newly married couple to their new home. Inside the limousine, silence lingered between them. Kael Blackwood sat with his usual unreadable expression, occasionally glancing at documents on his tablet as if today were nothing more than another business meeting. Beside him, Elian sat with both hands resting neatly on his lap, too nervous to move or speak. He didn't know what to say to the man who had become his husband only a few hours ago. The only sound inside the car was the quiet hum of the engine. Nearly an hour later, the convoy slowed before a pair of gigantic iron gates. The moment the gates opened, Elian's breath caught in his throat. His eyes grew wide with amazement. The estate before him was beyond anything he had ever imagined. A long marble road stretched into the distance, surrounded by perfectly maintained gardens, crystal fountains, and centuries-old trees illuminated by elegant golden lights. The mansion standing at the end of the road looked less like a home and more like a royal palace. Its towering pillars, endless balconies, and magnificent architecture spoke of unimaginable wealth. Elian couldn't take his eyes off it. This is someone's home? It was said that the Blackwood family possessed wealth beyond imagination. Now, seeing it with his own eyes, he finally believed those rumors. But the more he looked around, the more uneasy he became. Security guards stood every few meters throughout the estate. Some patrolled with trained guard dogs. Others monitored surveillance cameras from security checkpoints. Luxury armored vehicles continuously circled the property. High walls surrounded the entire estate, making it impossible to see what lay beyond them. The mansion wasn't merely protected. It was fortified. Elian instinctively swallowed. A frightening thought crossed his mind. If someone as powerful as Kael Blackwood wanted to imprison me, or make me disappear, who could possibly save me? His fingers unconsciously tightened around the fabric of his suit. The alpha sitting beside him hadn't spoken a single unnecessary word since the wedding. His calm silence was somehow even more intimidating than anger. Soon, the limousine came to a smooth stop before the mansion's grand entrance. Before Kael could even reach for the door, over 100 people had already gathered outside. Housekeepers dressed in immaculate uniforms stood in perfect rows. Butlers lined the marble staircase. Gardeners, chefs, chauffeurs, maids, personal assistants, and security personnel all stood shoulder to shoulder with flawless discipline. Not a single person dared to whisper. The moment the chauffeur opened Kael's door, everyone bowed simultaneously. "Welcome home, young master." Kael stepped out first. Then, instead of allowing someone else to assist Elian, he walked around the car himself and opened the opposite door. He extended his hand. Without saying a word, Elian hesitantly placed his smaller hand into Kael's. The alpha helped him out of the limousine with surprising care. As soon as Elian stood beside him, countless curious eyes briefly landed on the young Omega before respectfully lowering again. Kael's deep voice broke the silence. Everyone. Every servant immediately straightened. Kael placed one hand lightly against Elian's back. "This is my spouse, Elian Blackwood." The words echoed through the entrance. Elian blinked. It was the first time he had heard someone call him by his new surname. Kael continued, without changing his expression. From today onward, he is the master of this estate. His crimson eyes swept across every employee. The respect you show me, you will show him. My orders remain absolute. He paused for only a second before adding, but after me, his word is law. If he gives an instruction, you will obey it without question. If anyone disrespects him, they answer to me. A heavy silence settled over the courtyard. Then, in perfect unison, more than 100 voices responded. Yes, young master. We understand. Every servant lowered their heads respectfully toward Elian. Welcome home, young Master Elian. Elian froze. No one had ever welcomed him anywhere before. No one had ever treated him with such respect. For a brief moment, he didn't know how to react. He simply stood beside Kael, overwhelmed, while the entire Blackwood household acknowledged him as their new master. The moment Kael finished introducing Elian to the Blackwood household, he turned to one of the senior housekeepers, Mrs. Eleanor Hayes. A graceful woman in her late 50s stepped forward immediately and lowered her head. Yes, young master. Take my spouse to our floor. Of course, young master. That was all Kael said. Without another word, he turned and walked toward a black Rolls-Royce Phantom waiting at the foot of the mansion's grand staircase. The luxury sedan gleamed beneath the estate lights, its polished body reflecting the grandeur of the Blackwood residence. The moment Kael approached, one of his 4 towering bodyguards opened the rear door, while the remaining 3 formed a protective circle around him. Not a single movement was wasted. Everything was perfectly coordinated. Kael stepped inside the Phantom without looking back. The door closed with a soft click. A second later, the powerful engine came to life, and the Rolls-Royce Phantom began gliding toward the estate gates, followed closely by 2 black armored Range Rover SUVs carrying his security team. Within moments, the convoy disappeared into the night. Not once did Kael turn around. Not once did he say goodbye to the Omega he had married only hours earlier. Elian remained standing on the marble steps, watching until the last glimpse of the Phantom vanished beyond the towering iron gates. His ivory wedding veil still concealed his face, hiding the flicker of disappointment in his emerald eyes. He had never expected kindness from Kael, but somehow, being left behind so soon after their wedding still hurt. A quiet sigh escaped his lips. Perhaps this marriage would remain exactly what it had always been. A duty, nothing more. Younger Master Elian. Mrs. Eleanor's warm voice gently pulled him back to reality. If you'll come with me, I'll show you your new home. Elian gave a small nod. All right. The enormous double doors opened before them. The moment he stepped inside, he instinctively stopped walking. His eyes widened in disbelief. The mansion's interior was even more breathtaking than its exterior. Towering marble columns stretched toward an intricately painted ceiling nearly 3 stories high. Massive crystal chandeliers illuminated the entrance hall with warm golden light, while priceless paintings, antique sculptures, and fresh floral arrangements decorated every corner. The polished marble floors reflected everything like a mirror. It didn't feel like someone's home. It felt like a royal palace. Mrs. Eleanor smiled knowingly at his reaction. This way, young master. She first led him into the formal living room. Soft ivory sofas surrounded a grand fireplace carved from white marble, while floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the beautifully lit gardens outside. Next came the dining hall. A magnificent handcrafted table extended almost the entire length of the room, capable of seating more than 30 guests beneath another glittering crystal chandelier. Connected to it was an enormous professional kitchen, where several chefs quietly prepared meals with practiced precision. This entire residence, Mrs. Eleanor explained gently, is Alpha Kael's private home within the estate. Only people personally trusted by him are permitted to enter here. Elian nodded politely. I understand, but the truth was, his thoughts weren't on the mansion. They weren't on its luxury, or its breathtaking beauty. His mind remained fixed on only one thing. Why did he leave? Did something important happen? Or Did he simply not want to spend even a few minutes with me? He quickly dismissed the thoughts. He had no right to expect anything from a man who had married him out of obligation. Mrs. Eleanor guided him to a private elevator tucked discreetly behind an elegant wooden wall. This elevator leads only to Alpha Kael's private floor. The ride upward was silent. When the doors opened, Elian found himself in another luxurious hallway. Unlike the lively lower floors, this level was completely quiet, almost peaceful. Mrs. Eleanor spoke softly. This floor belongs exclusively to Alpha Kael. She smiled kindly. And from today onward, it belongs to you as well. She continued walking. Only a few trusted housekeepers are allowed to enter this floor. Apart from them, no one may come here without Alpha Kael's direct permission. Stopping before a pair of elegant double doors, she pushed them open. This is the master suite. Elian slowly stepped inside. The room was enormous. A luxurious king-sized bed occupied the center of the suite, facing floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the endless Blackwood estate. A private sitting area, an elegant fireplace, a spacious walk-in wardrobe, and a lavish marble bathroom completed the room. It was beautiful beyond words. Yet despite its warmth, the room felt strangely empty. Mrs. Eleanor remained quietly near the entrance. If you need anything, young master, simply press the intercom beside the bed. Someone will come immediately. Elian turned toward her and offered a tired smile. Thank you, but I'd like to be alone for a little while. Of course. She bowed respectfully. Welcome home, young Master Elian. With that, she quietly closed the doors behind her. The room fell silent. Standing alone before the enormous window, Elian gazed down at the glittering lights of the Blackwood estate. Everything around him spoke of power, of wealth, of privilege. Yet despite being surrounded by unimaginable luxury, he had never felt more alone. The bedroom remained quiet after Mrs. Eleanor left. For a long while, Elian stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the lights scattered across the vast Blackwood estate. Luxury surrounded him in every direction, yet he couldn't shake the unfamiliar feeling in his chest. This was his home now. Or, at least, it was supposed to be. He eventually walked into the dressing room. Neatly arranged inside were rows of brand-new clothes, each selected in his size. Someone had prepared everything long before his arrival. Elian gently folded his wedding suit and placed it aside before changing into a loose cream-colored sweater and soft gray lounge pants. The comfortable fabric eased some of the tension in his body. He glanced toward the bedroom door. Part of him wondered if he should go downstairs. Maybe he should wait for Kael. Maybe that was what a newly married spouse was supposed to do. But another part of him whispered that Kael probably wouldn't care either way. The day had been exhausting. His eyelids grew heavier with every passing second. Without leaving the room, Elian slipped beneath the blankets, curled up near the edge of the oversized bed, and before he realized it, sleep claimed him. The mansion was silent when Kael returned several hours later. He dismissed his bodyguards with a brief nod before making his way to the top floor. As he entered the master suite, the room was lit only by the pale glow of the moon filtering through the glass walls. His eyes immediately settled on the sleeping figure. Elian hadn't even realized he was home. For a moment, Kael simply stood there. This was the first time he had truly seen his Omega. Without the wedding veil hiding his features, without the crowd watching. Elian's beauty wasn't striking in an extravagant way. It was quiet, gentle. His peaceful face, soft features, and slightly tousled hair gave him an almost innocent appearance. Yet even in sleep, there was a faint sadness clinging to him. The kind of sadness that didn't come from one bad day. It looked as though life itself had slowly worn him down. Kael had spent years watching families reject his marriage proposals without hesitation. Some feared his reputation. Others openly admitted they would never allow their Omega to marry the Blackwood heir. He had stopped caring long ago. Marriage had become nothing more than another responsibility. Yet seeing someone waiting for him, even unknowingly, inside a room that had always been empty felt unfamiliar. Not uncomfortable, just different. He found that he didn't dislike it. Quietly, Kael changed out of his suit, careful not to disturb the sleeping Omega. Instead of waking him or claiming the space beside him, he simply lay down on the opposite side of the massive bed, leaving enough distance that neither of them could accidentally touch the other. The room fell silent once again. If anyone in the mansion had been asked what would happen on the Blackwoods' wedding night, every answer would have been the same. The feared Mafia King would surely overwhelm his delicate Omega. After all, that was the image the world had built around Kael Blackwood. A ruthless alpha, cold, dominant, merciless. But behind the closed doors of the master suite, nothing happened. No raised voices, no tears, no fear. Only two strangers sharing the same room for the first time. Sometime during the night, Elian stirred awake. Still half asleep, he instinctively turned his head. His breath caught when he noticed Kael lying beside him. The alpha was fast asleep, one arm resting beneath his head, his face far more relaxed than it had been throughout the day. There was a clear space between them. Kael hadn't crossed it. He hadn't forced a conversation. He hadn't demanded attention. He hadn't even woken him. Elian stared quietly for a few seconds. The image before him didn't match the terrifying stories he had heard growing up. Maybe the rumors weren't entirely wrong. Maybe Kael was still a cold and dangerous man. But tonight, he had shown unexpected restraint. Without realizing it, the tight knot of fear in Elian's chest loosened ever so slightly. For the first time since arriving at the Blackwood estate, he felt that perhaps he could breathe a little easier. A faint smile touched his lips before he closed his eyes again. The room returned to silence as both Alpha and Omega slept peacefully beneath the same roof, their journey together only just beginning. Morning sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, washing the master suite in a soft golden glow. Kael was already awake. For a brief moment, he remained where he was, his gaze drifting toward the other side of the bed. Elian was still asleep. The young Omega had somehow curled himself into the corner of the enormous bed, as though he were trying not to occupy too much space. One hand rested beneath his cheek, his breathing slow and peaceful. Without making a sound, Kael slipped out of bed and headed for the bathroom. Several minutes later, the sound of running water faded. Just as Elian lazily opened his eyes, the bathroom door swung open. His sleepy gaze instinctively wandered toward it. Then, he froze. Kael walked out wearing nothing but a white towel wrapped securely around his waist. Tiny droplets of water traced paths down his broad shoulders before disappearing across the defined muscles of his chest and abdomen. His damp black hair fell naturally over his forehead, making the usually intimidating Alpha appear younger than he did the previous day. Elian quickly looked away. His cheeks warmed. "Don't stare." He scolded himself silently. Yet, his eyes betrayed him. Every few seconds, they drifted back. Kael's physique was powerful, without appearing excessive. Years of training had carved every muscle into perfect proportion. It was beautiful. Realizing he had been staring for far too long, Elian hurriedly lowered his head. He hoped Kael hadn't noticed. Unfortunately, he had. Kael simply pretended not to. Unlike his usual schedule, Kael had cleared the entire day. For the first time in months, there were no meetings, no negotiations, and no blood-stained business waiting outside the mansion. He stayed home. Most of the morning passed quietly. Elian remained unusually reserved. Whenever Kael sat reading documents in the living room, Elian would secretly glance at him from across the room. The moment Kael raised his eyes, Elian immediately looked away. Sometimes he pretended to admire the flowers by the window. Sometimes he stared at his teacup. Other times he became strangely fascinated by the carpet. It happened again, and again, and again. Eventually, Kael closed the book in his hands. Elian, the younger Omega, looked up immediately. "Yes. You've been looking at me all morning." Elian's eyes widened. He quickly lowered his head. "I'm sorry."
Kael almost laughed.
Instead, he asked calmly, "Do you want to ask me something?" Elian shook his head so quickly that a few strands of hair fell across his forehead. "No, sir." The room fell quiet. Then Kael spoke again. "You don't need to call me sir." Elian blinked. "I'm your husband." His voice remained calm. Call me Kael. The Omega hesitated. The name refused to leave his lips. Calling the most feared alpha in Cloudland by his first name felt almost disrespectful. After several long seconds, he simply nodded. I'll try. For the first time, Kael smiled. It wasn't the confident smile seen in business magazines, nor the cold smile people associated with the Mafia King. This one was small, natural, almost gentle. The sight completely caught Elian off guard. So, he can smile like this. Something inside him relaxed. That single smile erased more fear than 100 reassuring words ever could. Kael gestured toward the empty seat beside him. Come sit here. Elian hesitated, then quietly walked over and sat on the opposite end of the sofa, leaving enough space between them for another person. Kael noticed. He didn't comment on it. Instead, he asked softly, Are you afraid of me? The question lingered in the air. Elian stared at his hands. After what felt like forever, he answered honestly, Yes. Kael remained silent. Why? Another pause. If you were afraid, why did you agree to marry me? Elian's fingers intertwined tightly. His voice grew quieter. I didn't have a choice. I wasn't asked. Those words immediately drew Kael's full attention. What do you mean? Elian swallowed. My stepmother wanted this marriage. So, I agreed. As I always do. Kael frowned. Did my parents pressure you?
No.
Elian quickly shook his head. They treated me kindly. They never forced me. It was my stepmother's decision. My father tried to stop it, but he couldn't. The room fell silent. Kael leaned back slightly. This wasn't the marriage he had been led to believe it was. He had assumed both families had agreed willingly. Instead, the Omega sitting beside him had simply accepted whatever fate others had chosen for him. After several moments, Kael reached forward and gently held Elian's hands. His grip was firm, yet careful. I didn't know. His voice carried quiet sincerity. If this isn't what you wanted, you don't have to stay. Elian slowly lifted his head. I won't keep you here against your will. If you decide to leave, I'll make sure no one stops you. Kael believed he was offering freedom. Instead, he watched the color slowly drain from Elian's face. The Omega lowered his head again. His shoulders trembled ever so slightly. Elian? There was no answer. Only silence. Concern flickered across Kael's face. Unsure what he had done wrong, he gently lifted Elian's chin. The younger Omega's eyes were already glistening with tears. You. His voice cracked. You're sending me away. The day after we got married, Kael stared at him in surprise.
No.
He answered immediately. I'm not. I thought giving you a choice was the right thing. Elian didn't respond. He simply looked down again. Kael slowly moved closer until only a small distance remained between them. Listen to me. His tone became softer than Elian had ever heard. I know I don't seem approachable. I'm not good with emotions. And I probably won't become the ideal husband you imagined. A faint smile crossed his lips. But I can promise you something. I will never intentionally hurt you. He gently cupped Elian's face once more. Their eyes met. So don't be afraid of me. Just stay by my side. Be a good boy. I'll take care of everything else. Elian's vision blurred. He nodded silently. The next moment, Kael pulled him into his arms. The embrace wasn't possessive. It wasn't driven by alpha instincts. It was simply warm, patient, safe. That warmth broke the final piece of restraint Elian had been holding on to. His fingers clutched the back of Kael's shirt as quiet sobs escaped his lips. Every fear he had carried into this marriage, every sleepless night, every cruel word spoken by his stepmother, every moment of believing he was unwanted, they all came pouring out. Kael didn't interrupt. He simply rested one hand against Elian's back, gently rubbing slow circles as the younger Omega cried against his shoulder. For the first time in years, Elian allowed himself to believe that perhaps fate had not been as cruel as he once thought. And somewhere deep within Kael's guarded heart, He realized that holding the fragile Omega in his arms felt far more natural than he had ever expected. Kael remained beside Elian until the younger Omega's breathing finally steadied. Only then did he slowly let go of him. "Come," he said, rising from the sofa. "It's time for lunch." Elian quietly nodded and followed him out of the master suite. As they descended the grand staircase, he couldn't help but admire the mansion once again. In the daylight, every corner seemed even more breathtaking. Sunlight poured through the towering glass windows, making the white marble floors shimmer beneath the crystal chandeliers. When they entered the dining hall, the staff immediately paused what they were doing. One by one, the butlers, housekeepers, chefs, and attendants respectfully lowered their heads. "Good afternoon, young master." It was the first time anyone in the mansion had seen Elian without the wedding veil covering his face. For a brief moment, surprise flickered across several faces. He was far more beautiful than they had imagined. His gentle features, soft eyes, and quiet smile gave him an almost delicate appearance. No wonder the young master had hidden his face from everyone during the wedding ceremony. Feeling so many eyes on him at once made Elian instinctively shrink closer to Kael. He had never liked being the center of attention. Still, not wanting to appear rude, he offered everyone a small, polite smile. "Good afternoon." His soft greeting caught many of the staff off guard. They hadn't expected the new master of the estate to greet them so warmly. Kael noticed Elian's uneasiness, but chose not to mention it. Instead, he simply pulled out the chair beside his own. "Sit." Lunch was surprisingly peaceful. The dining table was far too large for only 2 people, yet neither of them seemed bothered by the silence. Every now and then, Kael would quietly place another dish in front of Elian after noticing which foods he preferred. There were no unnecessary conversations. No awkward questions. Only a calm silence that somehow didn't feel uncomfortable. After lunch, Kael stood. "I'll show you the estate." Elian followed him outside, without hesitation. The moment they stepped into the gardens, Elian's eyes lit up. The estate was so vast that it resembled a small private kingdom. Beautiful stone pathways wound through endless gardens filled with blooming flowers. Elegant fountains sparkled beneath the afternoon sun, while ancient trees stretched high into the clear blue sky. In the distance, Elian spotted a peaceful lake reflecting the clouds above. Further ahead stood horse stables, private guest houses, a greenhouse, and several beautifully designed courtyards. Everything had been maintained to perfection. "This place is..." He searched for the right words. "Beautiful." Kael glanced at him briefly. "It has belonged to the Blackwood family for generations." They continued walking side by side. Unlike the previous day, the silence between them no longer felt heavy. It was quiet, but comfortable. After a while, Kael stopped walking. "There is something you should remember." Elian immediately looked at him. "You are free to go wherever you like inside the main residence and the gardens." His expression became more serious. "But don't explore the estate alone." Elian blinked. "There are areas that aren't safe for you. If you want to go somewhere unfamiliar, tell me or ask one of the trusted staff to accompany you." It wasn't an order. It sounded more like a reminder. Elian nodded obediently. "I will." Kael studied him for a second before giving a satisfied nod.
Good.
The walk continued. Minutes turned into nearly an hour. At first, Elian had been fascinated by every corner of the estate. Soon, however, the excitement gave way to exhaustion. The estate was simply enormous. His steps gradually slowed. His legs began to ache, though he stubbornly said nothing. He didn't want to complain. He didn't want to inconvenience Kael. But Kael noticed anyway. Without saying a word, he slowed his own pace until they were walking side by side at Elian's speed. Only then did he ask quietly, "Are you tired?" Caught off guard, Elian looked up. He hesitated before giving an embarrassed nod. "A little." For the briefest moment, amusement flickered across Kael's face. "A little?" His eyes drifted toward Elian's tired expression. "I think you've been exhausted for the last 15 minutes. Elian's ears immediately turned pink. "I'm sorry. There is nothing to apologize for." Kael's voice was calm. The estate is larger than most people expect. He turned toward the mansion in the distance. Let's head back. Without rushing him or making him feel embarrassed, Kael adjusted his pace once again, walking slowly beside his Omega. It was a small gesture, one that Elian wasn't sure Kael had even realized he was making. But somehow, it made walking back feel much easier. After returning to the master suite, Elian let out a quiet sigh and climbed onto the bed almost immediately. The long walk around the estate had left him pleasantly exhausted, his body warm and heavy. He settled against the headboard, scrolling through his phone with soft smiles as messages from his friends lit up the screen. Kael walked over to the desk near the window, where several documents waited. He tried to focus, but his attention kept drifting to the Omega beside him. Elian looked peaceful in the golden afternoon sunlight, his soft features glowing delicately. The faint, sweet jasmine scent that always surrounded him lingered in the air, stirring something deep within Kael's alpha instincts. The pull was undeniable. His mate was right there, close enough to touch. Unable to concentrate any longer, Kael closed the file and stood. He approached the bed slowly. Elian looked up, his heartbeat quickening as their eyes met. He still felt a flutter of nervousness whenever Kael drew near, though the sharp fear from their wedding day had begun to fade. "I'm not going to do anything you don't want," Kael said softly, his voice low and reassuring. Elian's shoulders relaxed a little. Kael sat beside him on the bed, careful not to crowd him. After a quiet moment, he reached out and gently brushed a loose strand of hair behind Elian's ear. "May I?" he asked. Elian hesitated briefly, then gave a small nod. Kael leaned in and kissed him, slow, warm, and tender. It was nothing like the stiff kiss they had shared at the wedding. This one carried real warmth, patience, and growing desire. When they parted, Kael searched his face. "Are you all right?" A blush spread across Elian's cheeks. "Yes," he whispered. They stayed close for a while, shoulders lightly touching as the afternoon light filled the room. But the closeness soon deepened. Kael kissed him again, slower and more intense this time. He shifted above Elian on the bed, their bodies pressing closer as the kiss grew heated. Elian trembled beneath him, nervous yet drawn to the warmth and safety of his alpha. His own scent sweetened with a mix of fear and budding desire. Kael's hands moved gently, caressing every curve of Elian's body with reverent care. The air between them grew thick with alpha and omega pheromones, jasmine blending with Kael's deeper, woodsy scent. They lost themselves in each other for a long time, kissing, touching, breathing each other in, until the tension finally crested and slowly eased. Afterward, they lay tangled together on the bed. Kael pulled Elian into his strong arms, holding the Omega protectively against his chest. His fingers stroked through Elian's soft hair in slow, soothing motions. Elian's breathing gradually calmed as he relaxed into the embrace, the quiet comfort of his alpha's hold wrapping around him like a warm blanket. Neither of them spoke. In that peaceful silence, simply being together was enough. They stayed wrapped in each other's arms for a long time, the quiet warmth between them lingering as the afternoon faded. Eventually, Kael pulled back slightly and brushed a strand of hair from Elian's face. "I have to go out now," he said softly. "Wait for me and be ready." The words sent a fresh wave of fear through Elian. His thoughts filled with nervousness about what was to come, making his Omega instincts tremble with anxiety even as a strange warmth stirred inside him. That night, Elian waited anxiously on the huge bed. When Kael finally returned, he offered a small, gentle smile. After freshening up, he joined Elian once more. Every passing second made the Omega's breathing quicker, his heart racing while his body felt strangely soft and yielding. Kael began making love to him with incredible gentleness and patience. He kept checking in, voice low and caring. "Are you all right?" he asked softly, again and again. Elian could only nod, his face flushed red with a mix of fear and shyness. Kael kissed him everywhere, slow and loving, as their clothes slipped away. Elian shivered under the attention, his jasmine scent sweetening the air. But as things grew more intimate, his expression changed, fear taking over. Please, Alpha, be gentle, he whispered, voice shaking. Kael stopped immediately. He pulled Elian close and kissed him tenderly. Don't be scared, he murmured. I won't hurt you. Then he asked gently, Is this your first time? Elian nodded. A spark of deeper desire flickered in Kael's eyes, but he held back. As they tried to move closer, Elian's fear overwhelmed him. Tears began falling down his cheeks. The moment Kael noticed, he stopped everything and gathered Elian into his arms. Don't cry, sweetheart, he whispered, pressing soft kisses to his hair. We don't have to do anything. I won't go further if you're not ready. Elian felt a wave of guilt. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, he kept repeating. I'm a bad husband. I can't even do my duty properly. Kael held him tighter, stroking his back soothingly. You don't need to apologize. I'm not mad at you. Your comfort matters to me the most. Those kind words melted something deep inside Elian. He didn't know why others called Kael a monster. In his arms, the Alpha had only ever shown patience and care, the first person to treat him with such gentleness. Safe in that warm embrace, surrounded by their mingled scents, Elian slowly relaxed. The morning sun filtered gently through the curtains, casting warm light across the master bedroom. Elian stirred beneath the blankets before slowly opening his eyes. For a brief moment, he simply blinked at the unfamiliar ceiling. Then yesterday's memories came rushing back. The Blackwood estate.
Kael.
He turned his head. The other side of the bed was already empty. Curious, Elian sat up just as the sound of cufflinks clicking together reached his ears. Across the room, Kael stood before the mirror. He was already dressed for the day. A perfectly tailored black suit hugged his broad frame, its sharp lines emphasizing his commanding presence. His silver tie clip caught the morning sunlight, while an expensive watch rested effortlessly around his wrist. The relaxed husband from yesterday had disappeared. Standing there was once again the cold and intimidating Mafia King everyone knew. Kael noticed Elian watching him through the mirror. Good morning. Good morning. Elian replied softly before climbing out of bed. You woke up early. I always do. Kael picked up his suit jacket from the back of the chair. I'm leaving in a little while. Elian paused. Leaving? I have business overseas. He slipped one arm into his jacket. I'll probably be away for a week. The room suddenly felt much quieter.
A week.
They had barely spent 2 days together. Elian hadn't expected their first days of marriage to end so quickly. His fingers unconsciously tightened around the blanket he was still holding. Kael noticed the subtle change in his expression. His voice remained calm. You'll have to get used to it. My work keeps me away from home more often than it keeps me here. Sometimes I don't return for weeks. Elian lowered his gaze. I understand. His reply was quiet. He didn't complain. He didn't ask Kael to stay. He simply accepted it, just as he had accepted everything else life had placed in front of him. For some reason, that bothered Kael more than he expected. He watched the Omega for several silent moments. The disappointment on Elian's face was obvious, even though he was trying so hard to hide it. Kael closed the distance between them before sitting down on the sofa near the bed. He remained silent for a while. Then, almost casually, he spoke. If you'd like. Elian looked up. You can come with me. His eyes widened in surprise. Kael leaned back against the sofa. I'll be busy. There will be meetings almost every day. I won't have much time to spend with you. He met Elian's eyes. So think about it carefully. Elian hesitated. It's all right. I don't want to become an inconvenience. Kael studied him quietly. So, you don't want to come? Elian immediately shook his head.
No.
Then he realized how that sounded. I mean, I do. He stopped speaking altogether. Embarrassed, he lowered his head. I just don't want to trouble you. Kael couldn't help finding the shy Omega unexpectedly adorable. He waited a few more seconds. When Elian still didn't say anything else, Kael made the decision himself. Go pack. Elian blinked. What? Only your essentials. We're leaving in an hour. The Omega stared at him in disbelief. Seeing the confused expression, Kael stood and walked over. He gently brushed a few messy strands of hair away from Elian's forehead before placing a light kiss on the top of his head. Don't make me wait. With that, he turned toward the bedroom door. I'll have someone prepare the luggage. The door closed behind him. Silence returned to the room. Elian remained standing in exactly the same place. His heart was beating much faster than before. He hadn't expected Kael to insist. He certainly hadn't expected him to take him along. A smile slowly appeared on his face.
Small.
Quiet, but impossible to hide. For the first time in years, someone had wanted him beside them, not because they had to, but because they chose to. The thought alone filled his heart with an unfamiliar warmth. Without wasting another second, Elian hurried toward the dressing room, unable to stop the excitement growing inside him. He had exactly 1 hour. And he had no intention of making his husband wait. Nearly 7 hours later, Kael's private jet landed in Silvercrest, the financial heart of Cloudland. As soon as they stepped off the aircraft, a convoy of black luxury vehicles was already waiting on the runway. Kael opened the car door for Elian before taking the seat beside him. The drive through the city was quiet. Elian spent most of it looking out the window, fascinated by the unfamiliar surroundings. Silvercrest was unlike the peaceful outskirts surrounding the Blackwood family's main estate. Towering skyscrapers dominated the skyline, their glass exteriors reflecting the afternoon sun. Luxury hotels, multinational company headquarters, designer boutiques, and elegant cafes lined the busy streets, giving the city an atmosphere of wealth and power. About 40 minutes later, the convoy passed through magnificent wrought iron gates engraved with the Blackwood family crest. A beautiful mansion soon came into view. It wasn't nearly as grand as Kael's permanent estate. Instead, it carried a different kind of charm. The mansion overlooked a quiet lake, with blooming gardens surrounding every pathway. Large oak trees shaded the property, while colorful flowers brightened every corner of the estate. Compared to the imposing Blackwood residence, this place felt warmer, almost peaceful. It feels different, Elian murmured without realizing he had spoken aloud. Kael glanced out the window. I stay here whenever work brings me to Silvercrest. Before either of them stepped out of the car, the front doors of the mansion opened. The housekeepers, butlers, gardeners, chefs, and other staff had already gathered outside to welcome them home. They had received the news days earlier. Their young master had gotten married. Naturally, everyone was eager to meet the Omega who had become part of the Blackwood family. Kael stepped out first before opening the door for Elian. As soon as Elian appeared, every member of the staff respectfully lowered their heads. Welcome home, young master. Welcome, young master Elian. The sudden attention made Elian hesitate. He wasn't accustomed to people greeting him with such respect. Still, he offered everyone a gentle smile before bowing politely. Thank you. His kindness immediately left a favorable impression on everyone present. Kael stood beside him, his expression calm as his gaze swept across the staff. This is my husband. His voice was firm but composed. The respect you show me will also be shown to him. No one dared interrupt. If he asks for anything, see that it's done. Then his expression grew noticeably colder. And under no circumstances is he to leave the estate alone. If he wishes to go anywhere, security will accompany him. Is that understood? Yes, young master. Only after hearing everyone's response did Kael turn toward Elian. I have meetings waiting for me. I'll return tonight. Before leaving, he adjusted the collar of Elian's sweater almost absent-mindedly. Don't skip your meals. It was a small gesture. One so natural that even Kael himself didn't seem to notice it. But Elian did. Watching Kael leave, a small smile unconsciously appeared on his face. The next 4 days passed almost the same way. Before Elian woke each morning, Kael had already left for work. By the time he returned, the night sky had long replaced the sun. Some evenings, he looked so exhausted that he barely had enough energy to loosen his tie before sitting down. Yet no matter how busy his schedule became, he never neglected Elian. Every morning, breakfast was prepared according to Elian's preferences. Fresh flowers appeared in their room every other day. Books somehow found their way onto the shelves after Elian casually mentioned enjoying reading. Whenever Kael returned late, he always carried something back. Sometimes it was a dessert from a bakery he had passed. Sometimes it was a cup of Elian's favorite tea. Sometimes it was nothing more than asking, "Did you eat well today?" Those small moments gradually became the highlight of Elian's days. Kael wasn't expressive. He rarely spoke about his feelings, but his care quietly revealed itself through actions instead of words. On the evening of the 5th day, Kael unexpectedly looked at Elian while fastening his watch. "Get ready." Elian blinked. "Are we going somewhere?" "My office." Less than 30 minutes later, their car stopped in front of Blackwood International Headquarters. The skyscraper towered high above the surrounding buildings, its mirrored exterior reflecting the evening skyline. Inside, hundreds of employees moved efficiently through the marble lobby. Executives from various companies filled the reception area, waiting for scheduled meetings. The moment Kael entered, the entire atmosphere shifted. People immediately stepped aside. Conversation stopped. Every employee greeted him respectfully. "Good evening, Chairman." Kael acknowledged them with nothing more than a slight nod. His face remained unreadable. His posture radiated quiet authority. As they walked through the building, he introduced Elian with complete certainty. "This is my husband, Elian Blackwood." Every executive greeted Elian politely. Some smiled. Others congratulated them. But what Elian noticed most wasn't their respect. It was the fear hidden behind it. No one dared joke with Kael. No one spoke carelessly around him. Even experienced executives carefully measured every word before addressing him. Throughout the evening, Elian witnessed an entirely different side of his husband. Kael listened patiently during meetings, but when mistakes were made, his response was swift and uncompromising. He didn't shout. He didn't insult anyone. He simply spoke with a calm voice that somehow carried more pressure than anger ever could. One sharp sentence from him was enough to leave an entire conference room silent. Watching him work, Elian finally understood why Kael ruled both the business world and the underworld with such absolute authority. This was the man everyone feared. Yet another detail slowly caught Elian's attention. Whenever Kael needed to deal with sensitive matters or deliver particularly harsh orders, he would quietly ask one of his assistants to escort Elian elsewhere. Only after making sure Elian was no longer nearby would he continue. It happened repeatedly over the next few days. Kael never explained why, and Elian never asked. Still, every time it happened, the same question echoed inside his heart. Why was the man who showed the world nothing but coldness always so careful with him? He wanted to know the answer, but for now, he lacked the courage to ask. As the days passed, Kael slowly realized that bringing Elian to Silvercrest had been the right decision. The reason for the trip itself left him little room to breathe. Blackwood International was establishing a new business division in Silvercrest, and several rival organizations had been interfering with the project from the shadows. Delayed shipments, leaked information, and pressure on potential partners had forced Kael to oversee everything personally.
It was exhausting.
But as the days went by, the workload gradually settled. For the first time since arriving, Kael found himself returning before midnight. Sometimes they shared dinner. Other evenings they walked through the gardens surrounding the mansion before the sun disappeared beyond the lake. Without either of them noticing, Elian slowly became more comfortable around him. The Omega no longer hesitated before sitting beside him during meals. He even smiled more often. Kael noticed every small change. He also noticed something else. Whenever he raised his voice while speaking to an employee or giving orders over the phone, Elian would unconsciously flinch. It happened only for a split second, but Kael never missed it. After that, whenever Elian was nearby, Kael deliberately softened his tone. Not because he couldn't command authority, but because he didn't want his Omega to fear him. 3 days before they were due to return home, Kael unexpectedly looked up from the documents spread across his desk. "We're attending a charity gala tonight." Elian blinked. "A charity gala?" Kael nodded. The Blackwood Foundation hosts one every year. The foundation had funded hospitals, orphanages, schools, and disaster relief projects throughout Cloudland for years. Every major business leader, influential family, celebrity, and media outlet attended the annual event. It's one of the biggest events in the country, Elian murmured. He had seen it countless times on television. He had never imagined he would attend it himself. Kael closed the file in front of him. I've already asked the staff to prepare everything. That evening, the mansion stylists carefully helped Elian get ready. When he finally stepped out wearing a cream-colored tailored suit, the room fell silent. Even Kael paused. The soft colors suited Elian perfectly, making his gentle features appear even more elegant. For a brief moment, Kael simply looked at him. You look good. A faint blush spread across Elian's cheeks. Thank you. Even so, his nervousness was obvious. Kael noticed immediately. Nervous? Elian gave a small nod. There will be so many important people. Kael adjusted the cuff of his sleeve before looking directly at him. You have nothing to worry about. As long as you're beside me, no one will dare trouble you. Those simple words somehow eased Elian's anxiety. The moment their car stopped outside the grand ballroom, hundreds of cameras flashed. Inside, conversations immediately came to a halt. As Kael entered with Elian beside him, every guest instinctively stood. Good evening, Chairman Blackwood. Kael acknowledged them with a brief nod before leading Elian inside. After greeting several distinguished guests, Kael was invited onto the stage. The hall fell completely silent. He delivered a short speech about the Foundation's work, thanking everyone for supporting its mission before his gaze shifted toward Elian. And, before we continue, I'd like to introduce someone. His expression softened ever so slightly. My husband. Every eye in the ballroom turned toward Elian. Warm applause filled the hall. Many guests smiled as they congratulated the newlyweds. Once Kael was called away by several board members, a few guests approached Elian to introduce themselves. They were polite, friendly, curious. From a distance, Kael continued speaking with several executives, but his attention never fully left Elian. Neither did that of the bodyguard stationed discreetly around the ballroom. Kael had too many enemies to leave his Omega unprotected. The evening continued without incident. Later, Kael guided Elian toward a quieter lounge reserved for senior guests. Several influential couples were already gathered there. As introductions were exchanged, one executive accidentally turned too quickly. The glass in his hand slipped. Red wine splashed across the front of Elian's suit. The room fell silent. The executive's face turned pale. I am so sorry, young master. Before he could finish, two of Kael's bodyguards had already stepped forward, firmly restraining him. Kael's expression changed instantly. His eyes became cold enough to silence the entire room. The warmth he had shown Elian vanished, replaced by the ruthless authority that had built the Blackwood name. No one dared move. No one dared speak. The executive's apology became increasingly frantic. It was an accident. I swear, please believe me. Elian stared at Kael. For the first time, he truly saw why everyone feared him. Before anything could escalate, Elian quickly reached for Kael's arm.
Kael.
His quiet voice broke the silence. It was an accident. He didn't do it on purpose. Kael didn't answer immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the trembling executive. Only after several long seconds did he look down at Elian. The fear in his Omega's eyes caught him off guard. He wasn't afraid of the executive. He was afraid of what Kael might do. After another pause, Kael finally spoke. Let him go. The bodyguards released the man immediately. Kael looked at the shaken executive one last time. Be more careful. The warning alone was enough to make the man bow repeatedly before hurrying away. The drive back to the mansion was unusually quiet. Elian spent the entire journey staring out the window. Kael noticed. He simply waited. Only after they returned to their room did he quietly ask, You've been distant since we left. What's wrong? Elian hesitated before answering honestly. I was scared. Kael frowned slightly. Of what happened? He lowered his eyes. When I saw everyone stop because you were angry. He swallowed. I kept wondering, what if I make a mistake one day? The question lingered between them. Kael stepped closer. I'm sorry. Elian looked up in surprise. I let my temper get ahead of me. He exhaled quietly. I wasn't angry because of the suit. I was angry because someone startled you. Elian shook his head gently. But it was only an accident. I know. Kael nodded. And I should have remembered that sooner. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Kael wrapped an arm around Elian's shoulders, drawing him into a gentle embrace. After a while, Elian asked softly, "If I made a mistake, would you look at me the same way?" Kael was silent for several seconds. When he finally answered, his voice was calm. "You're my husband." He rested his chin lightly against Elian's head. "No employee. No business partner. No one else stands where you do." He gently squeezed Elian's hand. "I don't expect perfection. I only ask for honesty. If something is wrong, tell me. If you make a mistake, we'll face it together." His expression grew more serious. "But don't deceive me, Elian. Don't betray the trust between us. It isn't fear I want from you. It's trust." Elian slowly nodded against his shoulder. "I understand." Kael's hand gently brushed through his hair. "Good." The room fell silent once more. This time, neither of them felt the need to say anything else. The following morning, Kael left the Silvercrest estate before sunrise. Today was the final inspection of Blackwood International's newest project. Months of preparation had led to this moment, and Kael intended to oversee every last detail himself before the official launch. Before getting into the waiting Rolls-Royce Phantom, he looked back toward Elian. "I'll be back this afternoon." Elian smiled gently. "I'll be waiting." With a small nod, Kael entered the car, and the convoy disappeared beyond the estate gates. After breakfast, Elian wandered downstairs instead of remaining in the bedroom. Over the past week, he had become surprisingly close to the mansion staff. The housekeepers chatted with him while arranging fresh flowers. The chef insisted he taste every new dessert before it was served, and even the elderly gardener had begun telling him stories about Kael as a child. For the first time in years, Elian felt as though he belonged somewhere. As they talked, one of the younger maids suddenly gasped while looking at her phone. "Young master, I think you should see this." Curious, Elian accepted the phone. Every major news outlet in Cloudland was reporting on the charity gala from the previous evening. Photographs of him and Kael standing side by side covered the front pages. Some praised them as Cloudland's most elegant couple. Others focused entirely on Elian. Kael Blackwood's mysterious Omega finally revealed. Does the Blackwood heir's husband truly match his status? Too ordinary for Cloudland's most powerful alpha? Thousands of comments flooded every article. Some admired Elian's gentle appearance. Others weren't nearly as kind. "He looks too simple. Someone like Chairman Blackwood should have married into another influential family. He doesn't even look worthy of standing beside Kael." Elian quietly scrolled through the comments. His smile slowly faded. The words shouldn't have mattered. They came from strangers who knew nothing about him. Yet, they still hurt. Another article appeared. This time, it discussed the incident at the gala. Several guests had secretly recorded the moment Kael's bodyguards restrained the executive after wine had been spilled on Elian. The internet had exploded overnight. Some called Kael terrifying. Others insisted marriage had changed him. The chairman let the executive go only because of his husband. Did Elian Blackwood soften the Mafia King? The only person capable of calming Kael Blackwood. Elian couldn't help letting out a quiet sigh. People who had never met them seemed convinced they understood everything about their lives. He locked the phone and handed it back with a small smile. "It's all right. I shouldn't let strangers decide how I feel." Just after 2 o'clock, the familiar sound of engines echoed through the estate. Kael had returned. Unlike previous days, he didn't head bedroom immediately. Instead, he entered the private office beside their bedroom to finish several reports before tomorrow's departure. The room remained silent except for the occasional turning of paper. A soft knock interrupted his work. "Come in." The door opened only slightly. Elian stood quietly at the entrance. Normally, he never disturbed Kael while he worked. Today, he looked as though something weighed heavily on his mind. Kael immediately noticed it. He set his pen aside. "Come here." Elian walked over hesitantly. Without another word, Kael reached out and gently guided him onto his lap. The familiar scent of jasmine immediately surrounded him. Kael closed his eyes for a brief second. No matter how exhausting his day had been, somehow, the gentle fragrance always managed to calm him. Elian relaxed almost instinctively, resting his head against Kael's broad chest. One of Kael's hands absent-mindedly stroked through his soft hair. Neither of them spoke for a while. Finally, Kael broke the silence. What happened? Elian hesitated. I saw the news. Kael already knew where the conversation was heading. They're saying I don't deserve you. That I'm too ordinary. Too plain. That someone like you should have married someone better. His voice grew quieter with every sentence. Kael remained silent until Elian finished. Then, he gently lifted the Omega's chin so their eyes met. You've been listening to people who know nothing about us. His thumb lightly brushed against Elian's cheek. They've seen photographs. They've read headlines. But they don't know the person you are.
His voice softened.
They don't know how kind you are, how patient you are, or how you make this place feel like home simply by being here. A faint smile appeared on Kael's face. If anyone asks me, they're the ones who don't understand. Elian looked at him quietly. Kael rested his forehead against Elian's. There isn't another person in Cloudland I'd rather call my husband. The words settled deeply inside Elian's heart. Without thinking, he wrapped both arms around Kael. Thank you. Kael smiled faintly before placing a gentle kiss on his forehead. Stop reading those comments. They don't get to decide your worth. They certainly don't get to decide mine. Elian nodded, feeling the heaviness in his heart gradually disappear. Outside the office window, the afternoon sun bathed the estate in warm golden light. Inside, surrounded by quiet and comfort, Elian realized something that made him smile. Perhaps, the place he had feared most had slowly become the place where he finally felt safe. Kael looked into Elian's eyes for a long moment, searching them for even the slightest trace of hesitation. Finding none, he smiled softly. Without another word, he slipped one arm beneath Elian's knees and the other around his waist, lifting him effortlessly into his arms. A surprised laugh escaped Elian as he instinctively wrapped his arms around Kael's neck. You'll spoil me like this, he murmured shyly. I intend to, Kael replied, his voice carrying the faintest hint of amusement. He carried Elian into their bedroom and quietly closed the door behind them, locking it to ensure no one would disturb them. The outside world, the endless meetings, the business rivals, the headlines, and the cruel opinions of strangers, was left beyond that door. Only the two of them remained. Kael cupped Elian's face with both hands, gently brushing away the last traces of worry lingering in his eyes. You don't have to carry those words with you anymore, he whispered. They don't define you. Elian leaned into his touch before closing the distance between them. Their lips met once more, this time with a tenderness that neither of them tried to hide. The kiss deepened slowly, filled not with urgency, but with trust that had grown day by day. Kael never rushed him. Every time he sensed even the slightest hesitation, he paused, giving Elian the chance to pull away. Instead, Elian answered each silent question by moving closer. The fear that had once filled his heart had quietly disappeared. In its place was a feeling he had never expected to find. Safety. When Kael rested his forehead against his, Elian smiled through misty eyes. Don't leave me. Kael held him a little tighter. I won't. His answer came, without hesitation. That night, they gave themselves completely to the love they had been carefully building since the day they met. For Elian, it wasn't simply their first night as husband and husband. It was the first time he had entrusted his heart to someone without fear. And Kael made sure that trust was treasured, leaving no room for doubt that Elian was loved, protected, and home. Outside, the night settled peacefully over the Blackwood estate. Inside, the bedroom remained undisturbed until morning. Hey, everyone. This is the censored version of this story, edited to comply with YouTube's community guidelines. If you'd like to watch the full, uncensored version, you can find it on my Patreon. To visit my page, simply scan the QR code on the screen. On my Patreon, You'll also find my other boys' love stories, their uncensored versions, and early access to new episodes before they're released on YouTube. Thank you so much for your support, and I hope you enjoy the story.